Hello, it's Wendy again. Today we start the last lecture of PY3108 focusing on narratives, stories. This is another perspective per personality. At the first glance, this theory seems not related to personality very closely because looking at the life story, but actually in the life stories, in our life stories, it reflects not only reflects life stories, reflect our personality as well. So this is the departing point uh, of the narrative theory of personality. So in this lecture, I will cover the background of the narrative theory and also Adams' narrative view have the three levels. We will go through it one by one. And then in the next lecture, I will provide some of the examples to you how to analyze the narratives. For Adam, there are three levels for us to engage with the person. For example, when we meet a new friend or we meet a person in bar, we often categorize this person into the traits we have learned very quickly from the conversation. So this is the first level of Adams' engagement with a person, knowing a person. And the second level is the characteristic adaptations. And the third level, and Adam believe is the most important level, is the narratives. Let's go through it one by one. Level one, traits. And we already learned about trait theory, so we know what it is. Traits describe an individual's broad disposition. For example, we even use mindfulness as one of the disposition construct. And of course, we learn about the five trace theory as well, the big five, how to measure the big five. And traits provide the crucial information that stranger can quickly learn from each other, establish the knowledge of each other. And also it conceptualizes the informations. The information is conceptualized and also is integrated with the trait profile. Once the familiarity increases about the person, when we know more about the person, we often put the person into the trait profile. And this is the level one that Adam believe how we engage with the person, how we know about the personality of the person. Of course, Adam did not stop at the trace level, otherwise it's a trait theory. So he moved to the second level. When we know more about this person, then we know more about the characteristic adaptation of the person. And in this level, we consider personal strivings, goals, and motives. So this is related to social cognitive theory, isn't it? And also, at this level, personal concerns is more about personal concerns concerning about the person. And also conceptualization within time, place, and role. For example, for time, goals are defined in terms of future outcomes. Extroversion is not. So goals change, but extroversion is not. And also the outcome as well related to the outcomes. And people act differently in different places. For example, in church, in classroom, and in a pub, in a club, after drinking alcohol, people often behave differently. And also different roles, for example, as a son, as a daughter, as a student, as a friend, as a mother, as a father, give rise to different behavior. And also these roles talk to each other, try to negotiate with each other and come up with the solution. For example, as a student, you need to go to your own school, and as a parent, you need to take your children to school. Sometimes maybe the timetable clashed, and then need to arrange it so that we can do the both tasks perfectly. And also for the characteristic adaptation is more related to the goals and also social situation as well. And they may not unified and also may not purposefully. Sometimes maybe it's more about how to negotiate with each other and how to negotiate in different social situations. And level one, level two, the level one is more about when we first know about the person. And the level two, when we know more about the person, then we move to level two. And what about level three? For example, if we are a psychologist, and when a client coming in, after talking to the client, we may categorize the clients in terms of the traits, and then we know about the client's goals, struggling, motivation, and also different roles. And okay, after we knowing that, what else we would like to know? Stories. We want to know about the person's story. We want to know about our client's story. And knowing someone's identity, for example, narration of the self, revised over time, tells life story, is the best way. Narrative is the best way to know about someone's identity. And also narratives explain the reconstructed past, perceived the present, and anticipated the future. And so reconstructed the past through our story. What we talk about, what we tell people in our story is the past, but is reconstructed. For example, the same past, when we talk to different people, we may reconstruct different stories, and also how we perceive the present and what we anticipate about the future. So I have a couple of quotations here. And for example, Murray in 1997 talked about the world is a storied place that people construct as they live their lives. And for Sabine, and it is believed human beings think, perceive, imagine, and make moral choices according to narrative structures. The best way to understand people's situation in life or description of themselves and their relationship to and interaction with others is to let them speak for and about themselves in their stories. So these are the important notions about a story. Why we focus on narrative, because it helps us to know people. Particularly as a psychologist, we may have some evaluation, assessment, psychological assessment at the beginning of the session. But after the assessment, do we still use a SSP or we use Excel, we use whatsoever to calculate the scores? No, actually we sit there, talk to our client, trying to know about our clients. And this is narrative. So we learn to analyze narrative. It is an important task for us as future psychologists. And premise of the narrative view, selfhood is storied. Stories are ideal to capture how a character, by intention, enacts desires and strive for goals over time. The character is the hero in TAT, and it is the client in our practice in the future. And life stories organize disparate experience into integrated wholes. We have pieces of our experience and we put it into an integrated whole story. And if we remember in Freud's dream analysis, that's piece by piece, and not put the pieces into a whole story, rather than look at piece and piece to analyze the dream. So an internalized and evolving narrative sense of self in story. From our story in society, from our story, we can see the self in society. And this self is internalized and also evolving over time. And life stories are cultural texts. Stories are embedded in culture. Different cultures means different stories. For example, for myself, I identify myself as Australian, New Zealand, Chinese, because I lived in New Zealand for nearly 9 years after I moved from China to New Zealand. And then moved to Australia. It's already more than 10 years. And so I have different cultural views actually embedded in my selfhood. I love to walk around among four cultures, make the most of four cultures. So because the different cultures inside my selfhood, so even though it's the same past, when I talk to people, for example, when I talk to my Kiwi friends in New Zealand, when I talk to my friends in Australia, and when I talk to my friends in China, even though it may be the same past, then the story may be different because the focus, the cultural focus is different. So our life stories are cultural texts, are embedded in our cultures. Life stories are also tailored for particularly audience, just like I said, my cultural stories. And the recipient and audience for a story influences the type of stories told, even though the past is the same. Your story in the past are different. Some stories are better than others. And so narrative therapists work on this principle and trying to figure out what kind of story the person tell about, which one is better than others. And some stories are positive and some stories are negative. And which ones are positive stories, which ones are negative stories. And Matt Adam even gives some terms about the positive story and negative story. And sharing stories builds intimacy. If you want to build a friendship with others, you need to share stories. If you want to develop a relationship, you need to share stories. So stories are so important in our life. And for Matt Adams' narrative analysis, he interpreted structures and contents from more than 200 accounts from life story interviews, and proposed that the structure and contents can be understood in terms of 7 features. One is the narrative tone, whether it's a positive or negative. Another is imagery, and themes, ideological settings, nuclear episodes, imagos, and endings. So these are 7 important features in the story, in the narrative. Let's look at it one by one. Narrative tone overall emotional tone or attitudes. For example, whether it's romantic, it's tragic, or whether it's positive or negative. Imagery provides the narrative with distant field that conveys the unique quality of the personal experience from both senses, metaphors, and can be related to Freud's dream analysis. Do you remember in uh, Nora's dream, we use metaphors. For example, the metaphor of the jury case, metaphor of fires. And so even though we may not agree with Freud's psychodynamic, but we can still use his technique in the narrative. So that's why we all know that the later therapists are always standing on the shoulders of the previous theorists, and metaphor is one of the examples. Theme is concerned with motivations, and in the theme, agency is important, and this is an important concept in Adams' narrative analysis. For example, in Freud's psychodynamic as well as in trait theory, agency is not important at all. It seems we are passively accept what happened to us. But for Adams' theory, agency is important, looking into the people who are agent of their own behavior, of change. So agency denoting themes of power, autonomy, achievements. And there is another concept, communion, as well. And this is about the themes of intimacy, love, cooperation. So if the theme is about intimacy, relationship, love, cooperation, we call it communion theme. If the theme is about power, mastery, achievements, goals, we call it agency theme. And also ideological settings important as well. For example, religious, political, ethical, moral beliefs are embedded within the story. In every stories, we can see the ideology of the storytelling, of the narrators from their story. So, and also ideology settings account for of the origins of the beliefs, the religious beliefs, political beliefs, ethical and moral beliefs as well. Nuclear episodes. That's events stand up, either high, low, and turning points. And so nuclear episodes is episodes that is turning from high to low, and also kind of ambiguous, kind of unclear is the turning point from high to low, from positive to negative, from good to bad. I will give you some examples how to analyze in the later lectures. Key is in what memory means to you rather than a factual recount. So for the nuclear episodes, that's from good to bad. And actually, this is important to capture in the story. What does it mean for the clients? What's the meaning of the story for the person who tells the story? And imagos is an idealized, personified image of the self. And for example, in the warriors, the clowns, the caregiver, and these are the terms we use for imagos. Ending. And in the Western narrative structure, always have the starting and then the middle in the middle, there are some strugglings, and then solve the struggling, solve the problems, solve the challenges, and then have an ending, either happy ending or sad ending. All stories have endings, but ideally they spark new beginnings. The ending actually may be the new beginning of the next chapter of the life. And there is a script, what we call is generativity script, part of the life story that concerns how a positive legacy of the self is created. For example, we have a positive legacy in our stories and how it is created. That's the script. We call it generativity script. So these are the 7 features in the narrative from Adam's perspective. We will have I will give you some details how to analyze, how to use the 7 features to analyze the story in the later chapters, in the later lectures. And measurement techniques, and there are different interviews, different techniques for narrative interview. For example, life chapters regarding life as chapter by chapter, and maybe interview just one chapter of the person. And also significant episodes, that's what we have to talk about, nuclear episodes, either from high to low or from low to high, and also life challenges and how the person tell about the life challenges, how the life challenges are solved. Characters who have had positive or negative influences on the person in the story. Favorite stories, oh, this is my favorite stories. And what about future plots? What happened in the futures? And personal ideology and life themes. Actually, these techniques are related to the 7 features we discussed previously. And development. And from Adam's point of view, narrative develop across the lifetime. And from the narrative, we can assess, we can evaluate personality of the person. And for example, there are some pre-narrative era infant. For infant, they don't know how to tell the story. Children, they tell stories for children and early adolescents. And they started to develop narrative skills. And also during the skills, particularly during the pre-narrative eras, particularly infant and children, identity is not very clear. But they are immersed in experiences which will contribute to future stories. For example, in one of my mindfulness intervention, and that's for school students aged from 11 to 18. So there is a participant, a girl who's 15, and in the sharing about for example, they share the stories in their life, and she share the stories in early adolescence. And she said, I don't exactly remember what happened, just some, yes, scattering episodes. And rather than have the beginning and then what happened in the middle and ending. So this is the feature for pre-narrative era, early adolescent, for example, about 10 or 11, and even to 15-year-old, and the narrative structure is not very clear. And instead, the attachment style is an important feature for the pre-narrative era. Often talk about attachment to the parents, attachment to teachers, and this is the characteristic of a narrative in pre-narrative era. And narrative era, late adolescent to most of adulthood. Identity builds and evolves and changes over time and involves in ideological settings and nuclear episodes, the ups and downs as well. And during the age between 20s and 30s, creating and refining self-images in the narrative. So we can see the big jump from the pre-narrative era to the narrative era. Post-narrative era, and it's more in the uh, old elderly age and also late adulthood, and it's similar to uh, Arison's generativity and also the stagnation and integrated versus despair. And in the late adulthood, the stories can no longer be substantially changed. It's more built upon the experience in the past. So this is three eras have its very distinctive features from the pre-narrative era to narrative era and post-narrative era. For example, in post-narrative era, and the uh, episodes is more about, for example, illness, and also is more about memory in the past as well. Application, personality, and development research using the Adams narrative is very popular. I will show you some of my studies in the later slides or in the later lectures. And also narrative therapy is a widely used psychotherapy nowadays. And in narrative therapy, looking into it externalized problems, separate problem from identity, and also reauthoring through the therapy, uh, the therapist help the client to separate the problem from the identity. It's not a problem of your own, but it's a problem we can separate from the identity so that the client learn not to self-blaming, not to self-blame themselves. And also during the process, working with the client, the therapist help the client to reauthor the life story. Rewriting life stories to emphasize strengths and positive meanings. This is related to Rogers and uh, Maslow's uh, phenomenological theory as well as humanistic theory as well, emphasize the strengths and positive meanings of the story instead of focusing on negative self-talks. So actually we can see from McAdams' narrative analysis, we can see the connection, the link between McAdams' narrative analysis, narrative theory, and Freud's dream analysis, for example, metaphors, as well as traits, and also Rogers' phenomenological theory and Maslow's humanistic theory as well. We can see the interconnectedness among all the theories we have talked about. And of course, the environmental impact that's from the social cognitive theory as well. Well, thank you so much. This is the lecture, the first lecture of lecture 6, and it's about narrative theory. In the next lectures, we will have some examples to show you how to use the theories, the concepts to analyze some of the narratives and also cover the visual narrative as well, the pictures. Picture tells stories as well, particularly now we have our mobile phone in our hands all the time. It's so easy to take a picture and picture record our experience and how we analyze the pictures. And it tells a lot of stories. Every picture tells lots of stories and also tells uh, about the person's personality as well. And thank you so much. See you soon in the next lecture.